Well, based on recent reports, I'd be pretty surprised if we don't have resolution on the Stanford Cal ACC debacle by this week.
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with our media rights and mostly team-free and somehow still beloved, sort of, Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, review. Please and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We do have football to talk about later in the show, but we're waiting for this next realignment shoe to drop. We're just sitting around like, okay, when are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? I would like them to just do it or not do it, but it does look like this is going to be playing out over the course of this week, and we will be, of course, following it closely here on the show because it pertains to whether or not this league can rebuild, because the league, it's generally accepted, and I think makes a lot of sense that you could find a path to rebuild, not as a power conference, of course, but you could find a path to rebuild the league, but you need Stanford and Cal. You have, if they are not there, if it's just Oregon State and Washington State, I don't see that being enough. Like, then Mountain West or American will come into play. Maybe the Big 12, that would be really, really nice. But that's kind of what I want to talk about to lead today's show. So there was just kind of a rumor report flying around. Brett McMurphy tweeted something to indicate otherwise. And here's where I land on this. The rumor report flying around yesterday was that Stanford, Cal, Oregon State, and Washington State would all go try and join the Big 12 if the ACC doesn't add Stanford and Cal. Now, Brett McMurphy tweeted out something refuting that, and it's not the first time we have seen this happen. Now, where a credible reporter tweets something out that is refuting what another credible reporter has said, meaning sources are telling them different things. My theory on this is that Stanford and Cal are making this move to put pressure on the ACC, and I don't think it's very far-fetched. I'm sure some of you reached that conclusion as well. But no one, as I have said, would want to go into the season in an ideal world unsure of what their conference affiliation is going to be next year. Because then what will happen is, because this is all such a massive story, and I mean, it's true on this show, it's true on every other show. I see the numbers. You guys care about this stuff the most. And I understand it because it's interesting, and it is kind of the biggest story in college sports right now. Where are you actually going to be playing your sports? What conference are you going to be in the distant future and near distant future in this case? Because right now, Stanford, Cal, Oregon State, Washington State don't know where they're going to be in 2024. But no one, no football coach, no player, no fan, no administrator, no university president, nobody wants success on the football field, your most important sport that is driving all of this realignment on the athletic side of things. Nobody wants that to be overshadowed by a narrative about conference realignment. I don't think there's any upside to that whatsoever. So I think this was perhaps a deliberate leak. Maybe there's teeth to it. Maybe there is not. But I think either way, it got out because Stanford and Cal wanted to put pressure on the ACC because games start for them later this week. Utah plays Florida on Thursday. Now, that doesn't pertain to the four schools that we're talking about here in realignment, but they all play on Saturday. Stanford goes to Hawaii. Cal has got North Texas. Oregon State has got San Jose State, who I'll be talking about later in the show. And Washington State has got Colorado State. None of those schools, none of those programs, none of those coaches, I'm sure they would tell you, and they feel even more passionately about it privately. None of those coaches want to go into a post-game press conference and be asked about conference realignment. They want to be asked about football. You're tired of this stuff. I'm tired. Like, I just want resolution. It's interesting and fascinating, and there are a lot of different ways it can play out. That's why we've been talking about it here on the show. But I'm ready for this stuff to just be over. I want to know one way or the other. Just rip off the Band-Aid already. Tell me, are we going to rebuild the Pac, or are we going to be looking at more conference realignment and just, the Pac doesn't exist as a conference altogether, or, we can assess the options at that point in time. But Stanford and Cal, I think, are making this kind of media play so that the ACC has to figure out, okay, are we going to add Stanford, Cal, and SMU? Who would be willing to come in SMU at $0 in media rights valuation, which would then make them more appealing because they'd be able to, the conference would be able to keep that money. Like that would all, we'll address that when we come to it. But that's an interesting situation in and of itself. Now, that is the move that would most benefit, I think, and that the Stanford and Cal University presidents would certainly prefer. They would like to get into the ACC. The Big Ten is clearly done at this point in time, though I've said that before, but I think they were, and then circumstances changed. So circumstances can always change, but the ACC is the place where they're actively considering whether to add Stanford, Cal, and SMU. That move would leave Oregon State and Washington State to the Mountain West or the American most likely, and it would leave them out on an island. Now, this report that the Big 12 could be an option for all four, that would be great. Like, that would honestly, my preferred option, what is my preferred option? I just kind of thought about that as recording the show. Stanford, Cal, Oregon State, Washington State to the Big 12, I suppose would be my preferred option at this point in time. But really what I want most for these schools is for everyone to find a Power 5 home. That is what I would like to have happen. And if Stanford and Cal end up going to the ACC, Oregon State, Washington State most likely do not find a Power 5 home. So that's what I would like to avoid. But I also understand why Stanford and Cal are interested in getting into the ACC. There are a lot of reasons there, athletically and academically, but mostly I think at this point in time, athletically, because Stanford and Cal already carry a lot of weight on the academic side of things. Now, for Oregon State, Washington State, this is all about athletics. Like, that's what their priorities are. They're not big, academic brands or big schools in that sense, or big research schools or anything like that. Like, I'm not saying they're bad schools, but they are not a Stanford and Cal with that sort of academic pedigree. So that consideration, I don't think, is at the forefront of their minds. They're concerned about where are we going to be playing our athletics in 2024 and beyond. What conference are we going to be a part of? Now, they have reportedly been getting pitches from the American Conference, from the Mountain West, which is understandable. Both of those conferences should be interested in Oregon State and Washington State. I've said before, I think the Mountain West is the most logical option there, but I don't think the American would necessarily be a bad one. Travel would be a little bit more challenging, so a greater media rights deal that you have in the American probably would get offset with travel costs there. So I think the Mountain West would be, unfortunately, the best option that's there. But once again, Oregon State and Washington State are going to be chess pieces that get moved around in realignment, but they're not going to move themselves. They're going to get kicked around, right? If you think about wizard chess in Harry Potter, they are a piece that is going to be moved when Ron Weasley tells them to be moved. They are not a piece that's going to move. They're on Harry, Ron, and Hermione's side, not on the other side. The other side, they move on their own accord, right? They're, of course, enchanted chess pieces, and they move when they want to. Those two pieces, Oregon State, Washington State, will move when they are told to move, and they have to await resolution on all this sort of stuff. So they're just sitting there on standby. They're just sitting there on standby, waiting for all this to fizzle out, and I suspect it will this week. The combination of the season starting and this, Big 12 rumor, report, leak, whatever you want to call it, I think all that lines up with, by the end of this week, it looks like we're going to finally have some resolution on this stuff, and that'll be great because then we can actually get to the season. You can get yourself to a premier non-alcoholic brew if you go check out Athletic Brewing. So they are fit for all times because you can drink them anytime, anywhere, make any activity more enjoyable, whether you're watching a big game, whether you're watching a kid's game, because you don't have hangovers ever. Never. That's not a thing you get with Athletic Brews. They are changing the game in the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good, full of flavor, well-crafted, just like a full-strength beer. Their brews are great tasting and award-winning and beat out full-strength beers in global competitions. This is the best of the best if you're looking for a non-alcoholic beer. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Speaking of Athletic Brewing being fit for all times, second segment sips, fit for all shows. So as Oregon State and Washington State, who are fit for a Power 5 conference, await their home, football's right around the corner. And a couple things, I'm going to get back to them in just a sec, but I want to talk about a couple of, or one story in particular. But because I got a fun question about those two schools and whether or not a rivalry actually exists. We'll get to that in just a moment. But this piece of news came out yesterday that is logical and kind of a big brain play from Arizona State. So the Sun Devils for 2023 have self-imposed a postseason ban dating back to recruiting violations that occurred during the Herm Edwards administration. So this current coaching staff and players who were not responsible for what took place previously are going to pay a consequence for something that happened before their arrival. Now, is that fair? No. But there are university officials that are still there from when Herm Edwards was involved. You have the same athletic director, same president, so you can put it on them if you want. But here's why I think this is kind of a big brain play. I think that Arizona State is going to be the 10th or 11th best team in the Pac-12 this year. They finished 10th in the preseason media poll. Drew Pine, their one-time projected starting quarterback transfer from Notre Dame, got injured and is out for several more weeks, so their four-star quarterback Jaden Rashada is going to start. So I have long held the belief that for ASU, it was going to be the most logical path forward to invest in Rashada as your quarterback of the future, because that's why they recruited him. It's why they were excited to get him, and that's the sort of talent that he has. That they should treat this season as a rebuild year. They should just start Rashada for all 12 games. They should not look to use his red shirt and get him the most prepared possible going into 2024 as they enter the Big 12. I thought they should have done that anyway. And I wonder if this isn't kind of, another chess piece move to set themselves up to do just that. Because with the self-imposed bowl ban for 2023, their win total is 4.5. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. They could have made a bowl game. I think their ceiling is probably 5 or 6 wins. Like everything goes right. Maybe you pull another upset in there like you did at Washington a year ago. Things are going better than expected. Transfers pop and somebody else kind of fades who was expected to be better than them. That was a 5 or 6 win ceiling. So if making a bowl game was already going to be difficult, and you're going to have to impose this postseason ban at some point in time, you are now all in on this being a rebuild year. Every game still matters, but it matters a lot less if you can't make a postseason game. Now, culturally, brand-wise, sure, winning more games is better. Beating Oklahoma State would be amazing. A win over Fresno State would be nice, the reigning Mountain West champion and winner of the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl. Like, that's what they would probably like to have happen, is key moments like that. But now you've taken off the pressure of, we need to get to bowl eligibility to have our credibility up. No, you weren't going to get there anyway. Now, if you win 6 or 7 games and surprise me and prove me wrong, which has happened before, then guess what? You're doing really well. You can say there's cultural advantages, recruiting advantages, sure. But Kenny Dillingham has proven he knows how to recruit. They know how to use the portal. They brought in a good amount of talent this year, a lot of players from other Power 5 schools. And they've got a young quarterback who is going to have to learn and make mistakes. And now I think you can kind of take the edge off of, we have that goal of making a bowl game. Like, they're going to try to win every game, of course. I just don't think they can do that very many times this season. I have them going 3-9 or 4-8. I landed on 3-9. I could see 4-8, but with Rashada in there, he's probably going to make a lot of freshman mistakes. So I think this bowl ban makes a lot of sense because now you get it out of the way And then you go into next year, new conference, second-year head coach, second-year quarterback, more experience, and you're ready for things to take off from there. So I thought it was actually a smart move from Arizona State. Now, going back to Oregon State and Washington State for a moment. This question came in, which you can always do as well, whoever you are and wherever you are listening to or watching this show. YouTube comments or hit me up on Twitter at Smalls_55 or at LO_Pac-12. DMs and mentions wide open. This from Mr. Super Burgess. Whatever does it for you, man. Hey, Spencer, here's a bit of fun. Since Wazzu and OSU seem to be headed in the same direction, the future of their current rivalry seems in question. What name would you give the Wazzu-OSU game going forward? I am for the battle for the Columbia since the river divides the states. I'm going to reject your premise here. I don't know that Oregon State and Washington State have the sort of rivalry. They've had a lot of great matchups. Oregon State hadn't beaten Washington State in quite a while until this past season, but this is not a rivalry. And you can't create rivalries where they don't exist. You can't force it. You know what the Pac-12 for a long time tried to kind of pitch as, a growing rivalry because they joined the league together? Utah and Colorado. You know who have no animosity amongst their fan bases more than any other average matchup? Utah and Colorado. It's not a thing. Utah and BYU, the Holy War, that's a rivalry. Battle for Los Angeles, that's a rivalry. The Civil War, rivalry. The Apple Cup, rivalry. Battle for the Axe in the Bay Area, rivalry. Like, those are, you can't fake that. And I don't think that you can create them. You can have matchups that start to get a little bit more contentious. I think USC and Utah were starting to move in that direction. But until something like that happens on the field during a game that causes fans to get, more motivated or energized or passionate, or causes players to feel that way or just vibe around, each respective program, I don't think you can have a rivalry that you just decide to create. Like, I don't think the Oregon State-Washington State game, no matter what conference they end up in, I don't think that's going to ever deserve a name, because you just can't create that stuff out of thin air. You can't conjure that. I like the thought. To be clear, and I always appreciate the question, but I also give you all honest answers every time, and that's how I feel about that. So, speaking of on the field, we had some action on the field over the weekend. We had some actual, honest-to-goodness football. Now, a friend of mine texted me in the midst of week 0 games that didn't have a lot of big brands that were playing close games, didn't have any big brands that were playing close games. There were close games and there were big brands, but those two things did not go together. They'll go together this week, right? Utah, Florida on Thursday. Spicy matchup. Interesting note on the line there. It's back to like Utah around a touchdown, and we might talk about that more tomorrow on the show. But USC took the field on Saturday. A lot of talk on the broadcast on Pac-12 Network, which, again, was just a poetic way for USC's final season opener, that it was on Pac-12 Network, but it's the way it goes. So, a lot of talk about USC's defense. A lot of talk on this show. Our Locked On USC host, Mark Colkin, who was on the show on Friday, a lot of talk about the defense there. They brought in a lot of transfers who are expected to make an impact, who we saw on the field on Saturday. And then you looked up at the end of the game, and USC had allowed 28 points to San Jose State. Now, if it had been a different Mountain West team, or really just one, like Fresno State with Jake Haener, who's a baller and guy made an NFL roster for a reason, that'd be one thing. This was not that. Now, it was week 0. It was a football game played that counted in the month of August. So, am I allowing the possibility that USC's defense could improve as the year goes on? Sure. You have a lot of newcomers. Chemistry's a real thing. Getting into the flow of the system, getting into the flow of the season, it could improve. That being said, was that a good opening effort from USC's defense? Absolutely not. For a team that has faced nothing but questions about that side of the ball, it's been the principal question. Because everything we already knew about USC from last year has carried over to this year. Lincoln Riley's a great offensive coach. Caleb Williams is amazing. Like the play where he fumbles the ball and he chucked it for a 76-yard touchdown, There's nobody else in the country that can make that play. I don't even think Drake May can do it. That's why he's going to be the number one pick in the 2024 NFL draft. We knew that. We knew they had weapons, right? Dorian Singer caught a touchdown. Brendan Rice made plays, caught a touchdown. Zachariah Branch looks awesome. Looks every bit the 5-star receiver he was recruited to be. Their running backs, okay, solid, good enough. But they got a bunch of receivers, a bunch of weapons, and all the offensive firepower to score a bunch of points. And they won 56-28. That was the final score in the game. Here was the problem for USC, and this is going to continue being a theme as we progress throughout the course of this season. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. That's why you need to check out Gametime. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. I'm a big comedy guy, and as you probably know, I'm also a big sports guy, and Gametime's got all the tickets you need. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Once again, the defense did not pass the eye test. It's one thing if you'd allowed 28 points. This is the way the Arizona game should look for USC. This is what it should look like. You probably don't put up 56 points, but you're scoring in the low to mid to upper 40s, and you allow 28 points. That would be okay. That would be different because Arizona has a really good offense. They have a preseason second-team All-American wide receiver in Jacob Cowing. They have a stud in Tetairoa McMillan. They have a good quarterback in Jaden Delore who's productive. They have a good offensive coach. Offensive line is solid. That's what the Arizona game should have looked like, not the San Jose State game. When I was talking about that game, I didn't make an official score prediction, but I was thinking if USC has got that defensive unit corrected right now, again, it could change as the year goes on, and my opinion will adjust accordingly. But right now, the defense has clearly not been fixed. There was a piece in the LA Times that was titled, Lincoln Riley needs to fix the damn defense. Well, guess what? I'm not expecting that to happen. It's why I don't think USC gets to the playoff this year, because the Pac-12 is really, really good. Lincoln Riley teams have had this exact formula and won the Pac-12 before. USC could do that. They don't need a dominant defense to win the Pac. They don't need a good defense to win the Pac. They need an average defense. Actually, they can have a below average defense and win the Pac because their offense is going to be so good. We've seen that before at Oklahoma. But the defense is going to hold them back from getting to the playoff and perhaps winning the Pac-12 championship game as it did a year ago in both such instances if it doesn't improve. And the early returns in that game were not good. They were not good. They allowed almost 400 yards of offense at home to San Jose State, a Mountain West program who has a win total of 5.5 this year. Well, you may be wondering, well, was their schedule super tough? Is that why it's 5.5? No, here's their schedule. USC and Oregon State, they're going to lose both those games. Then it's Cal Poly, that's an FCS program, Toledo Air Force, Boise State, New Mexico, Utah State, Hawaii, Fresno State, San Diego State, and UNLV. That team with that schedule has a win total of 5.5. That's not a Mountain West powerhouse. It's a middle-of-the-road Mountain West team. That's what San Jose State is expected to be this year in the eyes of odds makers in Las Vegas. A year ago, they were a 7-5 football team. They only played 12 games, including their bowl game, because they lost. They had a game against New Mexico State get canceled because the Aggies had their season shut down. But they were 7-5 last year. They lost the famous Idaho Potato Bowl to Eastern Michigan. That's the team that went into the Coliseum. No, they didn't beat them, but it was 21-14 at the half. Not exactly what you were hoping for. And you allowed almost 400 yards of offense. That's not good enough. If USC wants to win the Pac this year, they're going to face offenses a lot better than that. And if San Jose State can put up 28, what can Washington do? What can Utah do? What can Oregon do? 35? 40? Because I watched Utah put up 40 twice on them last year. And yeah, they brought in more talent on paper. But guess what? I have the same question about my Oregon Ducks. Talent on paper is great and necessary, but then that has to translate over onto the field. And I have that question about Oregon's defense. I had that question about USC's defense. I didn't question that they brought in more talented players than the previous season, but it did not translate over the weekend at this point in time. Now, their pass defense was actually pretty good, right? The passing numbers are what you were looking for from USC going up against San Jose State. The Spartans were also not good on third down because usually passing situations. 21 of 38, that's 55% for 198 yards. Okay, that's good. But here's the problem. Where did USC get nipped in the bud last year? Yeah, it was the ground game. It's where they could. Tulane ran for like 300 yards. Utah ran for a bunch of yards and couldn't stop and could run play action with Dalton Kincaid as much as they wanted to. And will probably do so again this year. There were moments, I will give USC partial credit here, but certainly not full. There were moments where I thought their physicality was much better than last year in ways that I rarely saw. But overall, you look up at the end of the game and you say, no, they allowed 198 yards rushing. San Jose State ran for 7.3 yards a carry. That's not good enough. That is not good enough. Again, they could win the Pac because they can win shootouts. That can totally happen. But USC is not going to sniff the playoff if that can't improve. And they were talking on the broadcast about all the new transfers, Anthony Lucas and Bear Alexander, and they looked really, really good at times, and then they disappeared at times. And Mason Cobb, the transfer from Oklahoma State, and all these other guys were on the field, and they had a lot of freshmen playing and all that stuff. That effort is not good enough. It just, you're not going to slow anybody down in a sufficient way. Every game is going to look like the Utah game when you go up against a high-level offense. Oregon's got great weapons and a good quarterback. Washington has the best receivers in the conference, probably, at least the best receiver, and a great quarterback. Utah's got a really good quarterback, and they know how to run the football, and they're physical. And Oregon loves to run the football as well. Like, this is just, I think, a discouraging sign if you're a USC fan, that you brought in all that talent, you're going up against an inferior opponent in San Jose State, and they walked into your building and they ran for almost 200 yards on the ground and put up almost 400 yards of total offense and 28 points. It can improve. It's early, but it has to improve. It has to improve, or USC is not going to have the sort of season that their fans would like them to have, or that Mark Colkin thinks they'll have. He thinks they're going undefeated this year. Not with that defense, unless it gets better. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.